Following up and closing the loop on yesterday's disastrous testimony in the House Judiciary Committee by Attorney General Pam Bondi, it went so poorly for the Attorney General that Democrats and Republicans are openly calling for her to be fired or to resign in disgrace. And I want to play some highlights, or I suppose I should say lowlights, from the second half of the Attorney General's disastrous testimony. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, just to give you a little taste of what happened from start to finish, I want you to hear a compilation of the Attorney General losing her shit, frothing at the mouth as she was pressed with legitimate questions by both sides of the aisle.
This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to get, you're a failed politician.
Not a complicated question.
Well, I guess it is for you because you have a law degree and those are privileged. Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is? You're so obsessed with, you don't, do you?
I'm going to teach you the rules again.
Have you apologized to President Trump? Have you apologized to President Trump, all of you who participated in those impeachment hearings against Donald Trump? Nothing about helping crime in her district. She's not even worth getting into the details. Excuse me, I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No, and I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me anything.
I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Arlen,
you don't get a reclaim time when you don't. When I don't answer a question the way you want. Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
But we're going to move back to you.
I bet we are.
Yes, of course, because you're here to testify.
Yeah, so again, she's a total deranged psychopath, wildly unpopular, wildly incompetent, loathed, as you're about to be reminded, by both the left and the right. More on that in a second. But again, it went so badly that, again, even prominent conservatives are calling for her to be fired or resign in disgrace. Conservative radio host says Bondi, quote, should be fired or resign after House hearing flub. Conservative radio host Eric Erickson said Pam Bondi should quit or be canned after she said lawmakers and American citizens should be celebrating the stock market, quote, smashing records, rather than being fixated on the files tied to Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, when the Attorney General of the United States is asked why she has prosecuted no one related to Jeffrey Epstein, and this is her answer, she should be fired or resign. But neither will happen, which is another reason the Democrats are going to have a good election year. And it was kind of just an insane response by the Attorney General about a perfectly legitimate question. She was there to testify in large part because of her lack of compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And victims and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse were sitting behind her in Congress. It was just a startling thing. She refused to apologize to them. She refused to address them. And so she tried to pivot instead, even though she's the top law enforcement officer in the country, to a record-breaking stock market performance, which isn't even in her remit. So it was just tone-deaf, despicable, disgusting. And with that in mind, I want to play 2 specific segments, okay? We're going to probably play them in their entirety. The first is by General Moscowitz of Florida, okay? He's more of a moderate congressman, but one thing I like about Congressman Moscowitz is he brings the fight to MAGA, rhetorically speaking, and he calls it out like very few in Congress do. So I want you to hear his remarks to the Attorney General.
Without objection, the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Attorney General Bondi.
Good afternoon.
Oh, you're right. Good afternoon. It's been a long day. I wrote this morning. We've known each other a long time, and I'll always be appreciative for your assistance when you were Attorney General in Florida after the shooting at my high school at Marjory Stoneman Douglas in my hometown of Parkland when we passed a bipartisan bill, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, which was the largest policy response to a school shooting in American history. Your department also prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law a constituent of mine and former felon that had plans to kill me when he was picked up by law enforcement after he was target practicing in his backyard with 2 rifles, a scope, a silencer, 3,000 rounds of ammunition, an anti-Semitic manifesto. My name was the only name on their target list, and my kids found out about this from their friends at school. So thank you. However, the most transparent administration in American history. Before Trump, we didn't know the word transparency, apparently. It's been 12 months since you gave Republican influencers part 1 of the Epstein files. You said the list was on your desk. Then a memo came out and said that there was no list. Phase 2 of the binders never happened. The President of the United States says the Epstein thing is a hoax. He blasts his own base for wanting the release of the files. He blamed Barack Obama. Republicans voted against the release of the files in the Rules Committee. Then they refused to even return to the Rules Committee until they could be protected from future votes on the release. Speaker Johnson sends Congress home a day early before break. They sent the Deputy Attorney General to meet with Maxwell. She says something favorable about the president. Miraculously, she gets transferred to a minimum security facility. No one can explain why. Miraculously, the leaks to the Wall Street Journal stop. We come back from break. We have the Massey discharge petition. Republicans drop a rule, a non-binding resolution trying to kill the Massey discharge petition. The White House says passing the Massey discharge petition is a hostile act. Trying to stop the necessary 218 signatures, according to Republican members that signed it, the White House brought them into the Situation Room, you know, the place where the president goes for time of war, promising things like appropriations or maybe even to primary them. People in the room say you were there. It didn't work. We get the 218 signatures. We eventually passed the Massey petition. You guys didn't release the files. You were forced by Congress, every member of the House except one, and the entire Senate. The reason the president signed it is because it was a veto-proof majority. We can't agree on anything, and yet the entire House but one member and the whole Senate forced the administration to release the files. Kash Patel under oath said to Senator Kennedy, the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. We know now that's not true. According to documents, Epstein had a worldwide sex trafficking ring. Girls from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Russia, Paris, modeling agencies sending him girls. He even had a relationship with a summer camp where he groomed girls at a picnic table. Ghislaine Maxwell says 29 Epstein associates cut secret DOJ deals. Turns out there is a list. 6 names readily available if you unredact them. Co-conspirators named, but we got them when you unredact them. Maxwell recently tells a House Oversight Committee that she wants clemency to release more names. Kash Patel under oath said Trump's name appears less than 100 times in the files. We now know that's not true. Trump's name appears more times in the Epstein files than God's name appears in the book about God.
I want to stop right there. You need to clock that because the Attorney General references it at the end. She does not like that. She is pissed. How dare you? I can't wait for you to see it. I will also note before we resume the congressman's remarks here that, you know, basically he began by saying, listen, you and I did good work together. You used to be a person of relative principle in the past. So it's not like I have TDS or whatever. It's not like I've hated you from the beginning. But look how far you've fallen and look how incompetently you have managed this crisis. I think it's perfectly legitimate.
Okay, by the way, this is the Trump Bible. Move over, King James. Trump's name also appears more times in the Epstein file than Harry Potter's name appears in the 7 books about Harry Potter. Lutnick says that in 2008, he went to Epstein's home, says he had a massage table in the living room, that Epstein said he got one every day, that it was the right type of massage. He and his wife decide to leave and say they'll never be in a room with him again. Howard then says, I'm sure the Epstein stuff is all on video. He was the greatest blackmailer of all time. Well, how would Howard know that? But now the files are public, and in 2012, we find out that he and his family are on Epstein Island after Epstein pled guilty to state charges. I'm from Florida. I take my family to Disney World, not to Epstein Island. There are documents in the files that dispute the president's claim that he kicked Epstein out of his club. Allegedly, the president said that he asked Epstein to leave. Supported now, that's disputed, though, statements from the manager of the club. Now, Madam Attorney General, I have like 25 seconds left. So because I'm curious, and I'd like to see, flip to the Jared Moskowitz section of the binder. I'm interested to see what staff provided on the oppo on me, and because we're in the Olympics, I'm going to give it a grade. I just want to see how good it is. So give me your best one.
So first of all, nothing is funny about mocking the Bible and holding up a Trump Bible. That's what you did. You made a joke, and I find offense to that. That's all I have to say.
I want it from the burn book.
She's so triggered and pathetic. You made fun of the Bible. First, shut the fuck up. It's a free country. We can make fun of any text, including the Bible, anytime. We goddamn well please get over it. Number 2, he wasn't mocking the Bible. He made a joke about Donald Trump's disgusting version of an attempt to, monetize the Bible with the Trump Bible. That's pretty damn gross. But other than that, no, he just pointed out that Donald Trump is so prevalent in the Epstein files that there are more references to Trump in the Epstein files than God is in the Bible. I think it's a perfectly legitimate thing to point out. But again, she has no rejoinder for that. She has no rebuttal of that. All she can do is just get triggered like the snowflake she is. And the last thing I want to do is play some remarks here of a different sort from Representative Garcia, who I believe is no longer seeking re-election, and he's represents a district in Illinois. He reads Pam Bondi, the Riot Act.
Is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, glad you finally made it here after hiding for 4 months from this committee. I understand why you're hiding from us.
Chairman?
You're one of the worst attorney generals in our history and an instrument of Donald Trump's lawless authoritarian agenda, and I'm glad the American people are seeing who you are, how you act, and the lack of good values. You weaponize the Department of Justice to target immigrants, working families, and anyone that Trump deems an enemy of the state, all to protect real powerful criminals, including in your administration. My Democratic colleagues have focused on your cover-up of the Epstein files and your passion for protecting pedophiles and child traffickers. That alone is grounds for impeachment. But there's so much more to your corrupt tenure as Attorney General. You directed prosecutors to investigate elected officials in welcoming jurisdictions, and you got thrown out of court when you sued Chicago, Cook County, and Illinois. You directed prosecutors to prioritize low-level immigration cases while gutting enforcement against corporate criminals and public corruption. You revived draconian
You're
law
talking
of
about public corruption,
1798,
Whoa.
which should be repealed to illegally send people to a torture prison in El Salvador. You fired over 100 immigration judges, including the assistant chief immigration judge in Chicago, without cause, and installed unqualified military judges whom you instructed to deny asylum in violation of the law. You prosecute the president's enemies like Jim Comey and Tish James while giving impunity to federal agents who are murdering and brutalizing and terrorizing constituents, including in Chicagoland, in my neighborhood.
It's amazing. I want to skip right there to the very end because he makes a really good point at the very end, a call to action for the Attorney General.
And after all this, nobody supports you. I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm talking about conservative judges who are condemning the rampant lawlessness at DOJ under your leadership. Your prosecutors are quitting in droves over being forced to prosecute low-level immigration cases, including in Chicagoland. Your MAGA base despises you because you're covering up the Epstein file. How ironic. And even your own boss has repeatedly complained to your staff about you, calling you weak and ineffective. Weak and ineffective. That's what Donald Trump thinks of you already. You will not win, however. Chicagoland rejects you. The American people reject you. Our communities have demonstrated our strength and resilience in the face of cruelty and cowardice. Democrats must impeach and remove lawless officials like you and Kristi Noem.
Agreed. So I just love how he threw her own unpopularity in the fact that her boss and the MAGA base hates her guts. They do. They think she's incompetent. They think she's dishonest, and she's wildly unpopular, not just with Democrats and independents, but the very people who propelled her boss back to power in the first place. That's how poorly it went for Pam Bondi. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.